know, Marianne. We're expecting Greg and Lily from Stimson Landscape Architects to join.
Terrific.
Today, so.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It was a really, Lauren, I don't think you came to the Conservation Commission meeting last week.
Just gonna ask, how did that go?
I thought it went really well. So,
Agreed. Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
it
I
was
was on
promising.
my way.
Want
I
us
was on my
to explain why decisions are being made. You know, the building can be put in buffer zone. It's not going to impact the wetlands. There won't be any actual wetlands altered, and there will be buffer zone altered, and then we'll just make some, you know, some remediation efforts outside of that area. They were very flexible and accommodating.
Well, and I think Matt's point about, you know, not clearing as much
Right.
land is a huge.
Right, and putting it in previously disturbed,
Exactly.
you know, area. So yes.
Yeah, the critical thing will be how we present and strategize the
Yes.
remediation.
Yeah, and Stimson has a lot of experience with that.
Right.
So we have, you know, we have a good landscape architect on the team.
Right.
And
It was interesting.
Marianne and Mark in Monterey had to do quite a bit of remediation. So
Uh-huh.
if you have any questions, he could probably answer.
Okay. Okay, good. That's good to know. Okay.
They did it all volunteer. Oh, by the way.
Even better. Even better. We just did, so the town last week did 2 small wetland restoration projects on lot 032 that are outside of, you know, outside of where the library is going to be. And it was, so in that, I wasn't there, but I understand it went really well. So, so Penny Jakes, who's here, supervised it on behalf of the town, and then, but there was a wetland scientist involved, and then the town highway department did it. But that's good to know that it was done with all volunteers, because if we can do that, you know, people in Shutesbury love to do that kind of thing anyway. So.
Dominic, I'm sorry, we cut you off. Did you have something else you wanted to talk about? Oh, he's gone.
I guess not.
He got mad and laughed.
No, Dominic wouldn't get mad. Okay.
Yeah, he went to get that real quick. Yeah.
There's Porpla. Hi, Porpla.
Hi.
Hey, Marianne, just to check in, Matt was waiting in the waiting room for the call.
Oh,
I don't know.
There's no waiting room, so he must have been
Yeah.
on the
other link. Here we go.
a different link, because you all
Hey,
got it.
everybody. Sorry, I clicked on the link on the website on the calendar and it said waiting for the host to start the meeting. So I don't know what was going on. Anyway,
I don't know.
apologies for being late.
That's okay. Nice to see you. So we've just talked a little bit about, so we don't have minutes to approve, because I haven't typed those minutes yet from the last design meeting. So because I've been on vacation. So Penny has her hand up. Hi, Penny.
I have a quick question. I noticed in the most updated Zoom version that I have that it lists all sorts of opportunities to use AI to take your meetings, your minutes. Has anyone tried that?
No, but I'll try it next time.
Well, we have early on, I think maybe the first design meeting, we took the recording and put it through Otter because we didn't have anybody to take the minutes, and that's a similar process. So yes, we have used that process before. I think, Marianne, didn't you? I sent you
Yeah,
the
and then
transcript
what I
and
ended
you
up doing,
edited it.
I ended up just listening to the recording and taking the minutes because
Oh,
it was, if that was easier for me. Everyone is
Okay.
different. It was easier for me to just listen and type than to edit. But we've used AI for another library related thing. So I will look into it, Penny, and
I'll try that at our next regular meeting, just
okay,
to compare.
okay, good. Yeah,
I think it is like it's a new thing that Zoom is offering. I think we
Right.
haven't.
I think there are
Is it,
two
is
of
it Otter though? Is it?
No, I
can't
don't think so.
Oh,
It's
okay.
two different versions. One is free and one you have to purchase, I believe.
Okay.
it offered on this meeting, but I'll certainly look it up because the other thing that we used AI for was really kind of fun and useful. So
Well, just so you know, one of my projects, they used that process to do a transcript of their construction trailer meetings. And it was fine until it got very, very, very contentious and lots of anger and bad words were said. And they just put them in the minutes and sent them to us. So they're on the public record now.
yeah. See, and that's why when you're just typing the minutes yourself, you can
That out. Yeah.
cover themes that were discussed instead of word for word.
It was
Okay.
very entertaining at
I
times.
bet.
have to say.
Yes.
I bet.
Okay.
So
All right.
Lauren, it's perfectly accurate then, I take it.
Definitely.
I'm gonna start throwing out F-bombs at these meetings just to spice it up a little bit.
This early in the process, Matt?
Just to keep it interesting.
All right. So do you want to share your latest with us?
Yeah,
You're really the
if you
star
are
of
ready.
this show. Okay.
If you are ready for us, give
Yeah.
me a second.
Okay.
And by F-bomb, Matt, do you
Oh,
mean
Matt.
financials?
Oh, God.
Yes, that's exactly what I meant.
Let me make you the co-host.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Great. All right, so we have been continuing to refine things, work with consultants to coordinate. And so it doesn't look a whole lot different, but we've got a number of things to talk about today. So this is the plan that we shared most recently. We made some minor revisions based on comments that came out of the last meeting, specifically going from left to right. The book drop, Marianne, you had mentioned not
Yeah.
liking going through the storage room. So we slid the kitchen down, slipped the door into the book drop. This works. The disadvantage is that it adds another door on that wall, which is already kind of a busy wall of stuff. The kitchen, 3 doors. There's not a lot of room left over for anything else, but it accomplishes that goal of getting a door directly into the book drop. It also moves the kitchen a little further into the room rather than in this back corner. Maybe that's better if you're standing at this counter. It's a little bit more kind of in the room than it is in the corner, but we can continue to look at this to see if there are any other options. We're pretty limited really in terms of how we're going to be able to make that work and keep the kitchen as such a small component. Anything else sort of we considered, what if you rotate the kitchen and do a kind of galley, but then you're just adding square footage that we don't have. So this is the kind of the latest version of that. In addition, in the middle of the library, we were a little bit uncomfortable with the dimension between the circulation desk and the shelving that is just outside of teens. And so we took this whole area, circ desk, staff workroom, and we pushed it out a foot. So this dimension, which I think was measuring 5'9" is now 6'9". It's better. It's, you know, this is, everything is tight in this building, but that feels better to us. And as a point of reference, we measured the Wendell plan, and I believe that the distance from the circ desk to the opposite wall there is about 6 feet. So we're kind of in that range, and I certainly wouldn't want to get any tighter than that. And, you know, obviously the more space we have there, the better. It's the main kind of circulation spine of the building. And then lastly, there was a comment made about computers, shelving, and furniture in the children's room. We got rid of, just back up for a second, we got rid of this long kind of computer counter with shelving on one side, broke that up into, we were thinking this could be a collection of 30-inch mobile shelves that you can either nest together like they're shown here, or you could break them apart and configure them differently throughout the room. We've eliminated 2 of the desktop computers, thinking that there might be a couple of laptops based on that conversation. And then we were able to add a small table and chairs. And you'll see in the interior view, I think it helps free up the view into that space. It doesn't look so, the furniture isn't so imposing as it was in the view. I think, Andrew, you had pointed that out in the last meeting, that it really felt like an imposition when you were looking down the length of the library. So those are the,
below
yep.
that oval, is that more mobile shelving?
Yeah, and this, yes, we don't know exactly how this works. You know, if these are individual mobile units, then there's kind of a donut hole in the middle, and so in this arrangement, you'd kind of want to put a top on it so that you could use that surface. But that's the idea. I think that these are somehow combinations of mobile units that allow you to reconfigure things.
Okay.
We also have, we're showing this as a wall, and so this is a kind of separate space from this. In the model, I think Dominic, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we deleted this wall and it's just freestanding shelving that you can see over. And as we get into this, we'll want to talk more about how that works. We thought that as it's laid out here, we were kind of imagining that this end is the sort of toddler preschool area and collection, picture books and things like that, and that maybe having a kind of separation was not a bad thing. And then this was more kind of school age kids with the computers and, you know, school age collection, et cetera. So we can talk more about that as we get into it.
Okay,
Go ahead, Lauren.
we'll talk about that later. Okay. I'm just having, if you're in the toddler area, if you're thinking that those shelves are going to be 5 or 6 high, that doesn't work in a toddler space. So
in here, you mean?
yeah, 3 high is the max for that age group. So we have to think about that.
Okay, then that will affect the shelving on this wall as well, because this, we were assuming this was all, everything around the perimeter, we were assuming was 6 high. So it might mean that we need to add more.
5 for children.
Or sorry, 5 high. Yeah. It might mean that we need to try to incorporate more freestanding shelving if we're going to lose some of this wall shelving, right? If this is going from 5 high down to 3 high, we lose a little bit of shelving capacity.
We do have that seating bench that we could program for some.
We do. We were thinking
shelving.
of this more as like cubby storage for activities, toys, and Legos and things like that.
Well, maybe the 3 high shelving on the walls could have cabinetry above for storage.
Above,
instead.
It's true. Yeah.
I do have to say, though, having worked in a library where in our children's room we had picture books underneath and, you know, that toddler area books underneath the bench, it was really hard to shelve and get to. So just for access, it's a little bit more difficult because you have to kneel down onto the floor to get to anything.
Good to know.
You're talking about for staff or for use?
For anyone, yes, both.
Yeah.
Except for the the ones that are eye
The
level
kids.
with it, the
Toddlers.
2-year-olds and
Right.
3-year-olds.
Exactly. That's their sweet spot. Okay, well, that's something we'll have to get into in a little more detail as we press ahead. So moving on to whoops. So we have some updated exterior views, and we've been talking with our structural engineer, trying to work through this revised system. And what we found in our discussions with them is that there are, the way that we have this modeled as a symmetrical gable that's open all the way up to structure, we need to introduce some horizontal ties, some structural horizontal ties that tie from one side of the building to the other. And I'm realizing now that I could have laid out the order of these slides a little better to help this conversation, so I'm going to skip around here. So this is the interior then of that you've seen before of the gable, showing, you know, roughly what these would be. These would be sort of cable ties that anchor into the edge of the member, and then also have a vertical component. And these are in tension, and they're providing some additional structural support. And it has everything to do with the fact that the ridge is unsupported, and so we have these members going up to a ridge and framing it. And it's, I mean, we still think this is an even further simplification of the structure from the VE'd structure that we talked about when we were doing our cost control exercise, where we had gone from all glulam to a hybrid steel and glulam structure. We saved, I think, 130,000. This is even still savings beyond that, and mainly because we've replaced all of the columns and column footings with load-bearing exterior wall. This is all just wood frame load-bearing exterior wall on a conventional spread footing. It's the simplest, you know, sort of structural solution along the edges. And so even though there's a premium for these ties, we still think there's probably going to be a net savings even beyond the structural revision that we had proposed. That said, we wanted to look at another option, which is if we were to shift the ridge over to align with the wall, that ridge is no longer unsupported. We have the ability to use this wall now as a load-bearing wall that's picking up that ridge, and it eliminates then the need for the horizontal ties. So it simplifies the overall structure. So it would be less expensive, we think, than a version like this. It has a slight impact in terms of the way the space feels. Obviously, you know, it's kind of a single pitch now in the space than the other way. And going back out to the exterior, we actually think the exterior, the difference in the way the exterior reads is pretty minimal. So if you look at this is the symmetrical gable. This is the asymmetrical gable, where the ridge has shifted over to align with that wall. The slope of this side of the roof changes a little bit.
Does that give more room for solar panels on that longer side?
On this side, yes, but on the other side, it reduces the size of that. So I think the net result is going to be no different, one versus the other. It's maybe a little bit unequal. We'll get a little more on this side, a little less on the other side. So we'd have to have our.
Which side is?
Well,
this?
so this is the west side, and so if we look at so this is the east side of the building. You know, entrance is down here. Parking lot is sort of in front of you and to the left. This is that view, and then this is with the ridge shifted over the kind of asymmetric pitch. So this pitch is getting a little bit steeper. You know, the slope of this side is a little different than the slope of this side. And then if we look at the meeting room end, this is the symmetrical gable. This is the meeting room at this back corner. And then that's the asymmetrical roof. So it's a pretty subtle difference from the exterior. The interior, obviously, it's a little more pronounced, the difference between the two, although the overall feel of the space, I think, is pretty similar. And then this is a view now of the meeting room, which you have not seen before. This is a view as currently laid out with the symmetrical gable and the steel ties. This is a view if we shifted the gable over to the wall. And again, this is all kind of coming out of an interest in making this as simple as we can to try to reduce cost. And so we do think that there's probably a cost savings here. We don't know exactly what that difference is. I mean, the difference really will be the difference in the cost to make and install these steel rods. And I actually have a photograph of what they look like, which I thought I had put in here and I didn't. So let me pull up that photo and I can show you.
Matt, just
Yep.
walk me, if we went with the offset gable, walk me through how the structure would transfer down through that wall on the right.
You're talking about in this?
Yeah. I guess I'll cut to the point, Matt. I think what I'm concerned about is that wall has several openings all the way down the whole perimeter, which are probably going to have to be structurally bridged. So I'm envisioning in my head, 6-inch wood posts, LVLs basically running under the ridge line above that. And I'm struggling to see how that would be cheaper than some collar ties across the roof.
Well, you're going to have to frame these openings out no matter what. Is that what you mean? We're going to have headers over these openings.
Yeah,
no
but
matter
it's
what.
going to be a different header, Matt, if that's a structural wall than if it's a non-structural wall, right?
Yeah, but so I don't think it necessarily needs to be a structural wall. And Dominic, you jump in because you were on the call with LeMessurier, but I would think that you could post up, in these locations where you've got the wall coming all the way down to the ground. So here, down here, you'd have a number of different places where you could post up. If you go back to the plan, post, all along here, you could get posts going all the way up to support that ridge. Whereas when the ridge is in the middle, it's unsupported its entire length. And so maybe it's not a load bearing wall, but you would get point supports along that column line that would support that ridge. And I think, as I understand it, that's the difference between the two and between needing the ties and not needing the ties. Dominic, is that?
Yeah, that's correct. We discussed both. I mean, I think basis for design would be stick built, load bearing wall that's in that offset position. And to your point, Neil, we were talking about LVLs bridging those openings. But I think, as to Matt's point, they are around 9-10 feet, something like that, those open spans. We would need something, maybe it's not an LVL, but there would still need to be some substantial support there to bridge that, tying in the lower ceiling and stuff. So our high level thought from the structural engineer would be that an offset ridge would potentially be cheaper. So I think the other consideration is the additional trade, right, to get this in.
Yeah, presumably this would be Miss Metals, right? Not structural steel. So it adds another layer of complication. But I mean, I suppose another way to approach this would be to have our estimator quantify it for us so we understand what the difference is. But there's also, I mean, beyond that, there is an aesthetic component to this, right? And so you guys should weigh in on what you think about this purely based on how the space looks to you. And again, this is a photograph of a similar kind of installation. There would be, these sort of connector plates where the rod attaches into the wood structure. And there'd also be a connector where the rods come together in the middle. This is obviously a different structural system. These are much bigger glue lambs. There's no ridge. It's a little bit different, but you get the idea of the ties. So if we look at the space, you can imagine that these connections would be a little bit more pronounced than the way that they're showing here. Any thoughts or reactions from the group?
I don't mind the asymmetrical roof. And if, if Jeff and Stephen, mostly Jeff, but Jeff and Stephen want to weigh in on what they think of that structurally. I'm getting an echo. I hope you're not.
I like the asymmetrical design aesthetically. I'm not big on the collar ties rods aren't. I've seen this before and it's okay, but I think the other solution is a little bit nicer, a little cleaner. And I like what it did to the elevation also, having the ridge shift a bit. Yeah, I like that better.
Stephen, I think you're muted if you're talking.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I had my earbuds plugged in. I agree with what Jeff said, and I also feel that there are significant areas of the building, say the meeting room, and parts of the adult section, where you don't get the full sense of the gable when you're inside, when but with the offset, it's just a clean slope up to, that ridge, if you will. So I think it's actually, in terms of how it feels on the inside, I think it might be a little bit better. And I actually like the look of the offset ridge on the exterior. Given it's such a small building, it adds another dimension to the aesthetics of the exterior.
Yep.
Okay. Any other comments about that?
No.
All right, so we have Greg Tuzzolo here with us today from Stimson, our landscape architect, and we wanted to go back and talk about the site plan. You guys remember these from our meeting with Concom, the comparison of the schematic design layout and orange representing the area of trees that would be cleared relative to the current layout, which dramatically reduces how much we're clearing to the south, and still tries to get this kind of slipped in between the two 25-foot buffers. Greg has done a sketch here. I'll zoom in a little bit that he can talk to of this new placement of the building. Greg, take it away.
Good, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to meet you all. The interesting thing about this study, I guess, is that I don't think it changes all that much from back where we basically kind of taken what we had in the original SD and sort of compressed it a little bit. I think, there were some comments that I heard from the Conservation Commission that I thought were interesting, although I don't know that we have quite responded to them. Those having to do with the kind of, sort of the prioritization of, or the sort of impact there in their mind of placing a building adjacent to a wetland versus pavement. This scheme here does do a nice job of kind of avoiding the wetland on the south side, kind of wraps around it. This guy, or excuse me, not south side, but the page south, the
East side.
East side. Thank you. That right there kind of skirts around that, and puts the turnaround sort of behind that. I think even knowing that there may be a little more latitude with putting pavement, in the buffers, I still kind of think that this is the right way to go. The one thing that you'll see that I've done, which is, there are several options that we will study on this, but I kind of was just wanted to sort of explore the idea of shifting to a one-way direction for this loop, and then looking at doing angled parking. Essentially from this moment here, the loop would be one way, and then as folks come out, they could either return through the loop or exit. Some people don't really like angled parking. I think in this particular instance, I think it works pretty well. But this I did by hand, so we would obviously carefully draft this with all the appropriate dimensions and so forth. But I'm showing 12 spaces, including the two accessible spaces closer to the front of the building, the bus or vehicle drop-off space a little bit farther up the driveway. The main advantage in my mind of the one-way loop with the angled parking is that it really does just kind of reduce pavement overall. So I was just really looking at trying to trim down pavement as much as possible. It's very possible that we could make this loop a little bit tighter, even given that it's just one way. We'll look at all that, and sort of work to sort of fine tune things. But as a kind of concept, I think it remains generally the same as what we had before. Just kind of rework some of the alignments, reworked the alignment of this entry drive to kind of make it a little bit more gentle. I think I'm still showing some kind of a pathway. It's not meant to imply that it's concrete the entire way, but rather it could be a kind of a more of like a granular shoulder, if you will, just a level enough space so folks who might be walking from, say, if they're dropped off by the bus or walking from an adjacent house, that they have somewhere to get off the main asphalt if cars are sort of coming and going. So that remains. We have some kind of space here for signage of some kind. I was just kind of hypothesizing that location, but I think it's a reasonable location. The buffer from the neighbor's well is something like that in red, and maybe it's a little bit even tighter to this corner. But the septic or the leaching field footprint, I think it might even be possible that it could come down even another sort of 10% in size, I think, from recent correspondence. But I think, I kind of held that size just for now. I think it feels like it fits quite nicely. One aspect of that, of course, is that we will find out at some point soon at what elevation that needs to be at. So obviously if it's higher, then we need more horizontal space to manage the side slopes to get up to that, to create, the sort of mound that everyone's familiar with, that is sort of typical to see on residences. I've included this kind of notion of a bioswale feature, just kind of an interceptor of stormwater that could, could be fed by, runoff from pavement kind of all the way through, and that it generally would convey water kind of out and away from the building into some kind of a settlement area. We're not totally sure yet where that water needs to go, but we'll, certainly be working with civil to kind of figure that out. But that it generally does follow the kind of the grades, of course. And let's see, the other aspects that I've kind of tried to handle here, a perimeter pathway, with the understanding that we've got, these doors on the north and west side of the building, south, that all need to be, we need to provide a way for folks to egress the building and get to a point of refuge. So that's an initial take on that, how that could work. And some of the big decisions there, I chose to not to take folks from here and bring them around the back, as opposed to connecting that right to the front sidewalk. Just thinking that I don't know how if this door is purely egress, but it felt like you might not want that to become a kind of widely used exit with a clear desire line out to the parking lot. So I just thought we'd kind of the swale itself will have a slight depression to it, and to get a pathway across that, you typically would really want to make sort of a bridge. So kind of trying to avoid that, I just kind of kept the pathways running around that west side of the building. And the zone, this sort of zone up here becomes sort of highly speculative at this point. I understand that there's sensitivity about tree clearing, absolutely. So I was kind of trying to suggest in this drawing that maybe there's opportunities for in spaces that say are clear already to make kind of groves and openings where there could be, movable tables and chairs, benches, any type of opportunity like that. But I think what we're anticipating is that once we are in a more kind of on solid ground with where the building is situated on the site, that we would work to field stake the building and really go look very carefully at all the vegetation in this zone, make more of a clear determination of what we might like to keep, what we'd like to edit out, what the kind of on the ground opportunities might be for reading garden of various types, and we certainly could do that as a group. I'd be very glad to meet with her. I actually live right down the road in Leverett, so I'm very, very accessible to the site myself. Let's see, a few other things. Just threw in some bike parking in the back. That could come to the front door. Doesn't necessarily need to be in the back, but we kind of have a level open area towards the back that seemed like a reasonable place to throw in some bike parking. And that's essentially it at this point. Happy to take any questions or comments. From our perspective, it's still, I really did just want to kind of capture some of these ideas to get it in front of the group. But we'll be taking a much closer look as we work to revise our SD scheme. So very glad to hear any thoughts.
Ask a question. Is the loop because of the requirement from the fire department? Or is the loop because you need more parking spaces? Or both?
It is primarily due to the request from the fire department. And I haven't been directly in contact, but I understand, Matt, you and your team have worked with them to determine that is their request, to have a clear turnaround capability for fire trucks.
Yeah, they were worried about backing up the length of this drive, and also the fact that it's not a straight drive. I think they felt a little bit concerned that they wouldn't be able to manage that. The other thing was they wanted to be able to provide a spot, which we have here, which is a drop off, but it's also a spot where an emergency vehicle can park and another emergency vehicle can get by it, drop off hoses, and then exit the property again. So that's partly the reason for some of these things, but also just, you know, thinking about a parking lot, it does facilitate parking and exiting when you've got a turnaround like this. And this is the first that we're seeing this diagram, but what I like about the parking kind of hugging around half of this loop is that we're reducing the paved area to some degree, or at least softening it down at that end. You know, if you look at this early layout where we had kind of a straight run of parking here and then the loop, this feels a little more efficient in terms of its arrangement.
Yeah, I don't mind a diagonal parking. I don't like asphalt, and the more of it I see, the less I like. So I was kind of wishing there was another solution. That's all. There may not be.
There are other solutions that tend to be either, you know, much more expensive, like 3-4 times the cost initially, or they're, you know, difficult, if not impossible to maintain, especially in the wintertime. So we talked about some of those options, and I'm still a pretty firm believer that you know, conventional asphalt at, you know, scaled down to its minimum footprint is really the most appropriate way to go here.
What I like about this relative to the asphalt is that it's broken up. At least, you know, you've got a planter here kind of breaking up the parking. You've got this whole island opportunity to plant. And whether I think in the SD package, we actually had below grade storage. You know, we had a Cultec system under the parking lot and turnaround. I'd like to continue to talk about that with our civil engineer to see if there's a way to make this more bioretention and avoid the Cultec. We may not have enough capacity, but it would be nice if we could eliminate the below grade storage.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. That this I lost, there it is, my pen. This zone in here is another opportunity for bioretention, you know, so we'll there as well. We'll work with civil to try to take advantage of every opportunity, but a lot of it will depend on kind of the overall, you know, grading pattern of the site. Where is water going? Where is gravity taking it? So.
Yep.
Lauren, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. What concerns me about this is you've got 12 parking spaces, and I get, you know, that's I haven't done the calculation as far as 400 one space per 400 square feet, but it's probably reasonable. But what concerns me about this is that we had talked about being able to use, you know, you've got a meeting room for somewhere between 40 and 60 people, and having an event. I mean, there's no street parking on Leverett Road. Where are people going to park when they're coming? We had envisioned parking along the driveway, and if you're minimizing the asphalt to the absolute minimum, that's not going to work unless there's some other solution.
It's possible that there might be an opportunity here for some more of like an overflow parking. That could be more of a granular material that you perhaps are not committed to maintaining in the winter. That could be, you know, it's structured, and, you know, so folks are not parking on lawn, but, you know, could be opened up for special events. Could be plowed, but if you choose to, but, you know, no, understanding that, you know, that there might be some damage there. But I think that's a nice opportunity. You know, rather not. Well, I'm less inclined myself to recommend, you know, paving beyond what you're minimally required, unless you feel that that's really is, you know, necessary for your programming. I think, yeah, we were just hitting the minimum numbers that, you know, that Matt gave to us.
Well, yeah, I
So-
want to hear from the Shutesbury people, you know, if you want people to be parking on the ground on the perimeter of that driveway, and that's okay with you, you know, let's hear from the locals.
I think it's okay because we do it all the time around here.
Right, that's what we do. I mean,
Yeah,
we
sure.
park at the fire station. You know, with advanced planning, if there's gonna be a big program. And then I think if there were sort of gonna be a plan for overflow parking, like if there were a way, it'd be better on the west side of that driveway as opposed to the east side. But we're used to, you know, we pull off onto the side of the common, you know, that is just what we do around here. We just pull off the road.
But understanding that that's going to have an impact on the landscaping.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
I'll just add that, you know, the highway department is right across the street, and there's a lot of capacity there if we had an event for additional parking.
Yeah, that's true. Didn't think about that.
Right. Right. They're right across the street, and then the highway departments, I mean, the fire department is 400 feet up the road. Penny?
I guess I have a little bit of a different view here. I'm thinking if you have evening programs, I don't think you want people crossing the main road to the highway department in the dark. You know, people fly by there. I think you want to try and have as much of your parking for events on the site as possible. And I agree with what Lauren is saying. I'm wondering if you can just widen the main access road that goes up to the building a little bit more so people can pull off on that. It's a concern to me to have so few parking spots and have a room where you're inviting more than 40 people to an event, particularly in the winter and in the dark.
So Greg, could that west side of the driveway, could that bioswale be moved a little bit west, and then sort of a larger gravel area there, where you kind of have a walkway drawn? Could that just be a wide shoulder?
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you're, I mean, I think certainly it'd be easier and probably more practical just to consider parallel parking. Like I think what you're suggesting is a longer shoulder that might be 8 feet wide or something like that, that could allow that type of stacking of cars. Is that sort of what you're suggesting?
Right, right, but just sort of a gravel area,
Mhm.
not a paved asphalt area.
Absolutely.
Well,
Does
how
it
many
need to
cars
be
you think
gravel?
it-
Could we just do reinforced turf there? Like, you know, an admixture?
Does that work in the winter when it has to be plowed?
You wouldn't plow it, I don't think.
You'd have to if you are asking people to either walk or park on it.
I mean, Greg, are we gonna be able to plow a gravel surface?
I mean, you're
Yes,
without-
all the time.
We do it
We-
all the time.
We
Yeah,
plow
and then
gravel
you'll
and
have to-
we plow the back of the town common where the folks on the church park, and it's just.
Yeah, you just have to raise your blade a little bit above. Yeah, it's done here a lot. I'm just wondering how many extra cars you can get in, like you just drew. And I know you're not doing it to scale, you just drew in like 6 cars. Do you think that's how many cars you would pick up?
20 feet apiece.
Oh,
I don't
I
know.
don't know what that is.
I don't have scale at this point, but I would, I would imagine probably more like, 8 or 9.
What about the possibility of a illuminated crosswalk, that you see, where when you get to the crosswalk, this would be for parking at the highway department, where you press a button and it either turns a light to red to stop the traffic, or it's that bright yellow flasher. Either one, and a couple of lights to illuminate that area when people are using it.
That sounds expensive. And I, I think that people kind of park across the street in Wendell and walk across the road to get to the library. I think that people park and at the library and walk across the street to the town hall or over to the post office. So I think it's I think that this will be ample, and then people will, we trick or treat along the road in the pitch
No,
dark.
but it's different because you have a police crew out there calming the traffic. And this is near and dear to my heart because my daughter and I were nearly killed when she was 2, and I walked her from town hall across to the library and someone flew over the top of the hill. So perhaps I'm overly cautious, but I think finding a way to have some additional parking on the site is worth investing in.
Mary Ann,
tend to agree with
what about on-street parking on Leverett Road, parallel?
No,
There's
Mhm.
not a lot of
there's
room.
no
Yeah.
space at all.
Okay,
And there will be people who find places to pull off, but there's not a lot of room.
Okay.
And I assume you're not, what about the idea of rotating these little red boxes 90 degrees? It gets us more cars, but it also means more whatever the material would be for the parking.
The only
See what I'm
concern I
saying?
have is when you have, let's see if I can sketch this in really fast. If you were to just hypothetically, let's just say we had spaces here. The only concern really is just that you then have, people backing out and trying to maneuver while right by the entrance. So there's probably a limit. Maybe that solution doesn't work for the kind of first 3 spaces. Maybe. I'm happy to provide a series of options or sort of add-on kind of parking options beyond the sort of base. And we can it does kind of come down to inches, and I drew this by hand, so there's some inches that I will gain, I'm sure, when we get it into a more precise drawing. We'll be able to tell you, okay, maybe it's comfortable to add 2 or 3 more, over here, say, for example, or maybe this, we can kind of push around some of the edges without kind of fundamentally changing the concept, I guess. And everyone can decide, is it worth a little bit of extra pavement to get in say 15 or 16 fixed spaces. Maybe that's step 1. And then step 2 is, what are the options for kind of auxiliary gravel pavement on top of the hard pavement? And we can kind of go from there. But I definitely, I hear what you're saying, and you know, we can definitely work to kind of identify those opportunities.
Because I liked your idea
Greg,
more.
I actually,
Go ahead. I more liked your
sorry, I was
idea.
just going to
of
say,
working on the east side.
I think you have a lot more room on the east to work with than you do on the
Right.
west. You don't have to deal with the
Right.
bioswale. You don't have the drop off. It means we would have to shift things, especially kind of in this area, a little further to the west to get it to work. But it seems like there's more ample opportunity along that side to pick up kind of shoulder side parallel parking than a handful of spots, you know, on the west side.
Yep.
Okay.
Can we talk a little bit, Greg, about this area here? You know, this
Yeah, sure.
the meadow. Because one thing that I note in your drawing is that, you know, this is the edge. If you can kind of see it under this overlay, that's the edge of the existing woods, or it's kind of forested edge now, and you're showing it here, which is sort of suggesting an attitude about the future of the current wetland resource. Oops, sorry, hit
Yeah,
the wrong button.
and you're absolutely right. I think another piece of information that we heard from the notes that I got from those notes in the Conservation Commission kind of pre-meeting was they were kind of hinting that, you know, the more we push their boundaries, the more they might expect and or ask us for mitigation. And my understanding is that there is, I'm sure folks have seen the map. I don't know if this is exactly it, but there is some kind of a wetland feature resource that comes into that open, what is currently largely an open area that is, you know, I'm not sure who's maintaining it or mowing it, but it's mowed frequently enough that it you know, remains a meadow. And so what I was kind of speculating here on is this idea of actually retreating from the current, you know, say the current mow line is in here, sort of retreating from that to some degree. Let's just say hypothetically it's here, and then essentially the you know, we're basically either revegetating by virtue of actively planting that space, or just simply letting it, you know, go through succession and kind of self forest itself by virtue of not being mowed. And I think to me, this strategy, I don't know exactly where to draw the lines just yet, but I think the strategy seems to work in that we still have, you know, we will have some kind of, you know, view shed to the building that we want to maintain, and that we can afford to kind of give over some of that space. I think, you know, I would certainly encourage us to all consider that when we go field stake the building and actually really see how those things lay out in the field. You know, my perception of kind of what, you know, what an optimal, you know, visibility of the building is, you know, there's a subjective nature to that, I think, and it's the kind of thing that we probably won't know until we stand out there and really look at it and kind of make a determination as a group about, you know, do we want to, you know, is even, you know, this red line here, is that even sort of too close or too much of a closing of the view shed from the street. But, you know, the fact remains, though, that we will be asked to mitigate the impacts that this project has on the 100-foot buffer areas, which we're clearly going to be, you know, well inside of for both the building and the pavement. So we probably should start kind of cataloging what are the various opportunities that we have that are affordable, that we can tolerate, to provide some mitigation. And this just seemed like a good one. And if the group is kind of conceptually comfortable with that, then we'll look to kind of get more specific on, where, how much, does it add up to, and then it will remain to be seen, I guess, if that sort of quantity of mitigation is going to be kind of enough in the Conservation Commission horse trading, that we probably will be looking at.
They seemed, we brought up this idea of the fact that we're pushing the building further into previously developed area, and the fact that this whole meadow out here is and has been for years mowed, including the wetland resource as mapped. And so the idea that, if this is the edge, whether you let the forested edge continue or you just say that we're going to stop mowing this whole area except for once a year, and let that sort of reestablish as a kind of wild meadow, including the edge of the resource, which is here. So I think you could argue that that's remediation beyond what's there now. And then, if you take it a step further and say, well, in this area, we're not going to mow at all, and we're going to let that sort of reforest over time. That, I think that's a kind of a follow-on discussion, but they seemed receptive to the idea that that the meadow would be sort of left to kind of rewild. They also, Greg, liked the idea of eliminating the knotweed that's along Leverett as a kind of counterbalancing amenity to this.
Yeah, I'm sure you folks have seen that sprout up in the last month or two, right where I've drawn the red circle, but it seems like that's the only knotweed that I've seen on the property. Man, it should be contained soon before it gets out of control.
And so what do you recommend for containing that?
Well, that's a debatable question. There's a lot of people try a lot of different things. Roundup really is the best thing that I've seen for if you kind of maybe put your blinders on to any kind of externalities, right? If you're just, focused on killing the knotweed, it works pretty well. And it probably, what I've seen people do is a kind of an injection. So it's not a broadcast sprayed treatment, but you pick the optimal time, which is usually the fall. You go in and cut the vegetation and inject Roundup directly into the stalks, and in the fall the plant is taking nutrients down into the roots, and so it takes that down into the roots with it, and typically kills quite a bit of it. And you may have to do it every year for 5 years, but you do eventually win, I think. And in the meantime, you can tarp it, with tough plastic to prevent it from getting any sunlight. But it's a campaign. There's no kind of quick fix, as I think
I do know. So
that's probably the most cost-effective way too. I can tell you, we spent maybe $30,000 on the vineyard trying to eliminate knotweed. Dug it up, carted off all of the plant material and the soil that it was in, and hauled it off island, and it came back anyway. So
it swam
Roundup
back,
seems like a pretty good approach. Right, exactly.
Okay, yeah. So what's the distance? So the wetland, you can see the wetland that's drawn. I have an idea. And Penny had her hand raised, but let me say my idea and then she can tell me why it's dumb. So the wetland You can see it, it's that funky shape, and then there's wetland behind it. And then there's wetland, you know, like, so then it makes like a U if you follow it above the screen. So I'm just wondering, I would really like to be able to mow right up to the edge of the wetland on, you know, between the library and the drive and that wetland. And I'm wondering if we could propose to the commission that we would allow that U to kind of fill in and become a wild space. And kind of give them that in exchange.
You're talking about this area.
It's more, it's actually, yeah, it's closer to Leverett Road. But yes, more or less in there. Penny, what do you think of that?
Well, I have a couple different thoughts. One is just a riff on tackling the invasives on the site. I think that is something that will resonate with the Conservation Commission. And I can tell you from doing the remediation last week, the little area on the east side of the site is full of bittersweet and multiflora rose and burning bush and a variety of things. So there are ample opportunities to consider that. I also think the commission is invested in the meadow. So I'm not sure they would want it reforested. That would be an interesting conversation. And then the last thing I was going to say is thinking of solar gain and trees. How far do you need the trees back from the building to have the solar gain that you need to power the building?
That's a good question, Penny. I don't know, and that's something we can talk about with our solar design consultant. They have modeling software that allows us to sort of predict the performance based on tree cover if we have a kind of estimate, you know. So it's really this area that we're talking about. I think that's potentially an impact, but you know, here that's probably 50 feet or more.
And I think
so
you need closer to 75 to 100 from just having installed solar on our house. So, you know, you will have to have some sort of clear area on both sides of the building to accommodate that.
Yeah, we can review that with him. Although the way the solar is laying out is we have solar sort of here and here.
Yep.
So, you know, at a certain point, you know, this is not going to be impacted by what's happening here.
Mm-hmm. And then just as we're talking about the site in generalities, two things to keep in mind is that there still is a plan, I think, to put community gardens on the site somewhere. And secondly, though not part of the library project per se, I think the goal is to put a tiny little play area outside for kids with you know, some structures. So I don't know where that would go.
Right. I think considering the cost of this project and trying to get this project down to a point where we can afford it, we have to let those ideas go for now. And then if the recreation committee wants to explore putting community gardens on this site, we're not going to build, we can't afford to build that into this project now.
Well, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting leaving spaces for those things,
right,
or considering a space for those things down the line.
But I think that those spaces can be created down the line and not be incorporated into this design now when we're trying to get this to a point where we can afford it.
Well, I think you're going to have to negotiate with the Conservation Commission again if you don't set aside those places.
But
now.
that'll be up to the Recreation Committee at the time. And then we do renegotiate with the Conservation Commission at the time when those things come up.
One thing that we've done in the past on the Hitchcock Center project is that through the design development phase, we included some of these other elements, and in that particular case, they actually even were intending to build them, and then ultimately couldn't afford them. And so basically, they are space planned, considered, and then when it comes to the construction documents, though, they're left out essentially.
That's what I was suggesting, that you just hold in your mind that someday we hope to do those things as well.
The one thing I'll say though about community garden that is concerning is that the space itself is, important, but I guess I'm just thinking about the kind of ancillary needs of that type of space, including parking, water, compost, all it might, and we don't need to decide anything on this now, but I'm just saying that that particular one sounds a bit more dicey in terms of its kind of implications on keeping this plan
Right.
kind of clearly focused on the library. And a community garden would have its own sort of pattern needs for parking and access that might start to conflict with this site. Now, that's not to say that the expectation might still be there that there's some kind of community garden on this property, but I think reconciling the two uses is concerning. Some kind of play equipment, or system or small area, definitely much more straightforward for us to kind of find a home for and consider, how that could be phased.
Greg, I just wanted to add as well that a Conservation Commission also raised concern of patron site access or restricting them to the wetlands. And I was thinking, what your thoughts were. I thought simply indicating markers would work there, against maybe site elements. I'm not sure if you had any kind of attitude to that as well, as we're talking about additional site use for patrons.
So you're saying that they want to try to deter people from walking into the wetland. Yeah,
yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think signage is the best way, both maybe a kind of, there could be kind of a site orientation sign somewhere that says, here's a map of the site. Here's what you'll, if you wander, you might see this feature or that feature, but then also kind of markers that kind of indicate, I don't know how frequent, but something that is, visually something that you won't see unless you're 10 feet in front of it. I think I would hate to have, visible markers out there. That'd be cool. That seems like a reasonable way to kind of have double duty, but we can consider that. I think that that is, I guess at one point there was discussion of trails and things like that, but to direct people, but I think that doesn't seem to be in the cards. I think the kind of limit of the improved area is going to be something like what I've drawn, might be even a little bit tighter, quite proximate to the building. And then, if anyone chooses to go wandering in the woods, that's, they'll just sort of be able to do that. And then I guess if there were, markers, maybe they're not on the wetland themselves, but maybe just off to, hey, you're about to enter a wetland zone, something like that, that we could figure out how to make that work, I think.
Yeah, we've previously used wetland markers at the Norwell Public Library, and that was sufficient. I wasn't sure if you had other strategies to. Obviously, cost is concerned too.
Yeah, and I think where it's wooded, you know, you'd want to just use trees and not bring new structures. Trees, maybe some, you know, 4x4 posts potentially, but you know, you want it to be kind of cheap, affordable, minimal impact. So I would want to. I'd be less inclined to kind of introduce something, a new kind of object out there other than just simply signage.
Right, boulders, or that's expensive too. So.
You know, all you have to do is just not mow the meadow to keep people out. People have such fear of ticks around here.
Yeah, that's a good point, that if we end up with some kind of, you know, mowing strategy that mimics this boundary, then that could be enough of a deterrent in and of itself.
It will be. It will be. The ticks are just atrocious there.
And there's so many places for people to hike and wander in the woods around the area that, you know, I guess I just would ask, you know, if folks really can imagine people really wanting to kind of get up and I mean, I guess you never really know, but.
Well, there are existing trails on the property, and people use them now. I don't think people will stop using them. I'm not sure that I would worry as much about that particular thing.
Right, and one of them over here, you know, we'll show a connection to that as well. I know that that's over there.
Yep.
All right, so we are marching ahead towards our pricing set deliverables, which we are based on recent conversations with our consultants. Originally, we had tentatively targeted the 10th. We're now looking at the 12th, that Wednesday, to send off our pricing set to our estimator. He'll take 2 weeks to price it roughly, and then we can report back. Is there anything else about the building or the site that you guys want us to be considering as we try to, put those documents together over the next 2 weeks? Any other comments?
Can we review the sometime how much glass we're going to have in the building, where it's located, and the size? Exterior glass.
We can. I mean, we can look at these and see where we have it. We've reduced the glazing from schematic design pretty significantly. I think our wall to window ratio in schematic design was around 38%, and it's now, I want to say, around 22 to 25%. So there's been a fairly significant reduction. We've also, because we've switched now to a gable roof, we've reduced the height of glazing along the long sides, and so I think there's a even further reduction there of glazing area as square footage. Actually have those numbers, I think, from our earlier presentation. Give me a second, I can pull it up. So this was a comparison of the exterior enclosure from schematic design. Window wall ratio was 38%. For the gable roof, we're now at 23% window to wall ratio. So wall area was reduced from 6,500 to 5,400 since SD, and total glazed area was reduced from 2,400 to 1,200. So basically, we've reduced glazed area by 50% since schematic design. We could quantify if we knew that offhand the unit cost that the estimate carried for glazing, we could put a dollar value to that, but that's a pretty significant reduction.
Well, I'm also thinking about, you know, who's gonna clean this glass that's sitting way up there in the sky? And I want, when you showed me the interior elevation of the meeting room, I
Mhm.
saw a band of glass above the person door. I was
Yep.
just sitting there, why do we need that band of glass above that person door? I understand the glass at the corner of the room. So I wouldn't mind
Yeah.
hearing from the other members of our committee on, are we
Show us that
overglazed?
picture again, Matt?
Yeah, I'm putting
Sorry.
it up now.
Yeah, that band of glass on the left above that door.
Yeah, you can see it
Yeah,
here too.
what's that?
Yeah, I mean, we can, there's still room here, obviously, to modify some of the glazing and, you know, look at the exterior elevations. We were looking for opportunities, and I think this goes back to Stephen's point from a couple of months ago during schematic design, when that meeting room was surrounded by overhanging roof. You know, he had raised a concern that it was potentially not going to get much natural light. And so this is maybe going a little bit further in the opposite direction, making sure that there's as much natural light as we can get. But I think if we were to, you know, reduce or eliminate the window above the door here and really focus on that corner, I think that would be fine too. We can study that. It was
Yeah.
really just trying to bring as much natural light as we could afford to into the space.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think just analyzing where we really need glass, where we don't, and also the size of each glass pane.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I think to add to Jeff's comment about the glass above that door, now that we don't have the outdoor program area and that orientation, I suspect there'll be a lot of light coming in through there, maybe to the point where we'd have a shade in front of it all the time.
Mhm.
So maybe eliminating that would make some sense if it works out.
Yeah.
Now, I have a couple other comments going back to the issue of the overflow parking. When Penny presented her comment about nearly being killed when crossing the street from the library, I assume over to town hall, I totally agree with her that that is a, say, dangerous crossing regardless, because I find just driving up not from that direction, but say from the library to then turn onto Wendell Road, you have to really be cautious because people do kind of coming from the other direction come out of nowhere. But down where the library is, I think there's a much longer field of vision. And I don't think it's going to be nearly as problematic from a safety standpoint. But then my other concern is, how do you know how many parking spaces you have to have if you have a overflow crowd at a library meeting event? My point being that you're not gonna, I don't think you can accommodate for every possibility. I mean, if people came individually, which I don't think will be the case, but worst case scenario, everyone drives their own car. And if you had 60 people there, I mean, you're not gonna have 60 parking spots. And it seems like it's going to be quite involved to get additional slots, parking on the site. So I guess I'm sort of saying, I think the highway department site offers the possibility for a lot of people to park. And I mean, you could put some traffic cones out when there's an event at night, or other simple measures to make people more aware. So those are my thoughts.
hey, Matt, what are you guys contemplating for exterior building materials? I noticed in your elevations, you now seem to be showing a standing seam metal roof.
Yeah, so for roofing, we are thinking that standing seam metal makes a lot of sense, and we'll want to look at specific products. Obviously, we want to be economical. At the same time, we're thinking about, this is a different application of the solar, and we're going to have roof penetrations, and we're also going to see the roof. So previously, you really didn't see that low pitch monopitch roof. So we were thinking TPO was a good option for material, as easy to seal those penetrations. If we're looking at a sloped roof, I don't think TPO makes sense. I mean, at a gable roof. And the nice thing about standing seam, and we've done this on a couple of projects now, the Eastham Library, which has solar on the entire roof area, is standing seam, and you're able to clip the rails for the solar panels to the standing seam. So there are no roof penetrations. So it's a good system for attachment. And I think we could probably find a relatively inexpensive standing seam metal roof. We'll have to start digging into that in design development, but we'll have that conversation with our estimator. I think for basis of design, we'll probably carry one of the recent metal roofs that we've used, which, was not, not an expensive roof. We did a standing seam metal roof at the Dartmouth Library that has solar attached to it, in the Eastham Public Library. So we could use those roof manufacturers as a basis of design for pricing, and kind of evaluate it when we get the estimates. In terms of exterior materials for the walls, we're still exploring options. And I think some of the same options, frankly, still apply. I think, hardy plank has come up a number of times, and we will carry that as one of the alternates for pricing. I don't love hardy plank, and I particularly don't like it for public buildings, but we'll carry that as a number, just so we understand it. We'll also continue to carry, a kind of baseline, what if this was Alaskan yellow cedar, just left to weather naturally, versus what if it was a thermally modified wood that's stained, or maybe the Alaskan yellow is stained. We'll have a number of different materials that we can evaluate. Metal siding is another possibility. There's some nice metal products out there. They tend to be more expensive, so I'm a little reluctant to include them. But what we're planning on doing is asking our estimator to provide, 3 or 4 different siding options. We've gotten pricing now from one of the suppliers for the thermally modified wood, so we'll have a better sense of how that compares to some of the other options.
Okay.
And I think that, I think the best we can do now is sort of get a little bit of a menu of options to our estimator for him to price, see where the overall cost comes, and then kind of know where we need to be, what price point we need to try and hit.
Okay. Sounds good.
Lauren, you had your hand up, and then I have a question.
Thanks. 2 things. One is I want to just respond to Stephen's comment about parking capacity. And yes, we realize that it's not reasonable to provide 60 parking spaces for the absolute maximum possible capacity of the building. But I think 12 is low when you have a meeting room designed for 49 chairs. So we want to get somewhere in between there to maximize safety. I agree that asking people to cross Leverett Road is not the safest option. I think I wouldn't want to walk along that road 400 feet from the fire station. I don't know what the local culture is like, but in the winter, in the dark, I wouldn't want to be doing that. So, yeah, well, we want to land somewhere in between. Excuse me. And my second question is a completely different topic. So I wanted to ask about the, Matt said you're projecting sending out the pricing set on the 12th. And my question is, we would want to see it before it goes out. And believe me, I know architects like to work until, 2 o'clock in the morning, the night before something's due. So, but there is at least on my calendar, there's a library building committee meeting then on the 11th. So is it going to be possible to get us that set maybe on Monday, the 10th, so we can look at it before it goes out?
I'm just looking at my calendar. I mean, Dominic, you let me know what you think in terms of an advanced copy.
Yeah. Lauren, would you like consultant drawings? I'm, we're coordinating with our consultants and giving them the 12th. So I would, at this point, I'm not expecting to receive any of their documentation until that day. So architectural,
Meaning
I
like
guess it's really
structure
just civil. Yeah, structure. I don't know if you have interest to see structural at SD, but a site plan from landscape is something I'm sure you'd like to see.
Yeah.
And civil potentially as well.
I would say this
Architectural, we could get
floor
you.
plans and site plan is what we want to see.
Right. Okay. So I don't know if the site plan would be fully resolved on Monday, but can we give you a working site plan? I'll see, Lauren.
Yes, yeah.
So yeah,
I just wanna, we talked about this early on in this project that
right.
asking us to approve something
Mm-hmm.
in a meeting when we're just seeing it for the first time is very difficult. We need a couple of days to look at something
Understood.
before we can say, yes, go for it. So
Mhm.
that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, will do, Lauren. Thanks.
Marianne, you had a question?
Yeah, so are there other less expensive siding options? Like, what about vinyl siding?
I will
and-
not do vinyl siding.
I-
No
Well,
way.
you're not gonna be,
We don't
Mo-
talk about exterior materials very often, but I will fight against vinyl siding all day long.
okay.
Absolutely.
What about aluminum siding?
I think
Do they still make aluminum
when you
siding?
say aluminum siding, and if you mean aluminum siding like the residential aluminum siding products, I would say no. I think there are some commercial grade metal siding products out there that we could consider, and some of them are going to be less expensive than others. That, like everything, there's a range, and we would obviously look for one that is on the less expensive end of the spectrum. But I wouldn't be comfortable going with like a aluminum or vinyl siding like you would put over top of failing shingles on your house.
So I'm just asking these questions,
We-
so.
We need a durable building, and those materials
Right.
are not designed to last. And
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all
And
right,
The detailing is terrible on vinyl and aluminum siding. It's gonna look crappy right from the get-go.
I agree about that, so, okay, but I just want to build this building. And it doesn't have to be pretty to please me. Okay, so, but anyway, you know that the direction I want you to be going in, the most economical.
Yeah.
Materials that we can, reasonably use. Okay,
I
So-
just saw a project published that was clad 100% in recycled oak flooring. And it was gorgeous. So if you know anybody out there who's reflooring their gym and there's a big surplus of maple or white oak, let us know.
I can't imagine that was cheap.
Did they leave it natural or did they
Left it natural.
they
Yeah.
left it natural? Wow.
I mean, I bet it was gorgeous, but I can't imagine it was cheap. Okay. All right, so the plan is you're gonna get us as much of the pricing set by the 10th, and then we'll have a library building committee meeting on the 11th. And then the pricing set goes out to the cost estimator on the 12th. And then, do you have a schedule slide? And then,
Sorry.
and then you get the cost estimate by the 26th.
Yeah, 2 weeks is what he typically needs. So, so the 26th, and then, it'll take us, call it a week for all of us to kind of collectively review it and see where we are and make any further adjustments that we feel like we need to make. Obviously, hopefully the number that we get this time around is within spitting distance of our target. But there's a possibility, of course, that we'll have to roll up our sleeves and continue to think about other ways to address cost. So I am assuming that will take us a week to do before we're ready to feel confident moving into the next phase, which we have starting the beginning of August.
So, okay, all right, so we're gonna wait for a pricing set from you on the 10th. We're gonna post a meeting for 7 PM on the 11th. And then the pricing set's gonna go off on the 12th. Okay, right?
Yeah, and yes, and the set on the 10th will be a draft. It's not going to be
Right.
100% complete at that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. All right, any last comments? Are you guys comfortable with where things are at this point?
Much improved.
Good.
I have one last question for Matt. Is the beautiful stone that you proposed initially off the table at this point?
Where did we have stone proposed?
On the exterior
I think she means slate.
slate, that stone.
Oh, slate shingle. We can continue to carry that as a possible cladding option. The interesting thing, thank you for bringing that up again, Penny. The interesting thing was that although it was a little bit more expensive than cedar, it was surprisingly affordable relative to the cost of wood siding. I think the difference between the two was something like $12,000, but you're talking about a material that's 100-year material versus wood that is going to have to be maintained every 5 years, and you might get 25 years out of it if you take care of it. So I mean, you can get a lot longer life out of wood too, depending on your maintenance and how it's treated. But slate is a really durable material, so we can carry that as one of the exterior alternates for siding and just see how the pricing comes in. There's less of it now, obviously.
Thank you.
I think that would be a nice idea. So
Mhm.
let's carry that if we could.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
You.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, Matt.
See you later.
Have a
Yeah.
good day.
Bye-bye.